The black car screeched to a stop and two men stepped out. They didn't run, they didn't shout, they just stood there across the street perfectly still watching, and that stillness, that cold deliberate patience, was somehow more terrifying than if they had charged directly at her. Emily's heart was already racing. 60 seconds ago she had been standing outside a restaurant, convinced the only thing she needed to survive tonight was the courage to finally meet the man she had spent 3 months falling for online. She had worn the green dress, she had done her hair, she had rehearsed what she would say when she saw his face for the first time. She had not rehearsed this. Alexander. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. What is going on? The man standing in front of her, the man she had known as Adrian, the man whose face she now recognized from a dozen magazine covers, the youngest billionaire CEO in the country, looked at those two men across the street, then back at her, and said the words that changed everything. Because the moment you met me, you became a target too. Emily couldn't move. We have to leave. Now. Behind them, one of the men started walking closer, slowly, deliberately, like someone who had done this before and had no reason to hurry. Alexander grabbed her hand and they ran, and just like that, from one heartbeat to the next, the quiet love story Emily thought she was living became something else entirely. Subscribe right now, because this story goes deeper than you think, and you will not want to miss where it leads. To understand how Emily ended up running through a city street, holding the hand of a billionaire she had met exactly 4 minutes ago, you have to go back to 2:17 in the morning, to a phone screen glowing in the dark, to a message that arrived when she was too tired to think clearly and just awake enough to make a decision she could never take back. You're still awake too, aren't you? Emily almost ignored it. She had been lying in bed for an hour listening to the city outside her window, her mind doing that thing it always did at night, replaying the day, dreading tomorrow, finding problems in things that weren't problems yet. Her phone had been buzzing all evening. She had ignored most of it, but something about that message was different. Maybe it was the simplicity of it. Maybe it was the profile picture. A man on a balcony, city lights behind him, something in his posture that looked less like someone performing for a camera and more like someone actually thinking. She typed back one line. She didn't sleep that night. They had met through an online forum where people posted late night thoughts when sleep refused to come. Most conversations lasted a few exchanges and disappeared, but Adrian stayed. Night after night, while the rest of the world was unconscious, he was there, present, consistent, asking the kinds of questions that made Emily feel like she was being genuinely studied, not in a way that was uncomfortable, but in the way that feels like a gift, like someone deciding you are worth understanding. He remembered details she had mentioned weeks earlier, a song she said helped her fall asleep, a childhood memory she shared once briefly and never brought up again. He brought it up, gently, at exactly the right moment. Emily was not a naive person. She had been through enough to know the difference between charm and sincerity, but Adrian felt sincere in a way she couldn't argue with, because the evidence was in the details. Liars are lazy. Whatever Adrian was, he was not lazy. 3 months in, she was waking up smiling, checking her phone before she was fully conscious. Her friends noticed. One looked at her across a cafe table one afternoon and said, "You've got that look." What look? The someone is making you happy look. Emily laughed. But she knew it was true. What she didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, was that on the other side of those late-night conversations, the man typing thoughtful messages in the dark was not sitting in a small apartment somewhere. He was sitting at the top of a glass skyscraper, in a leather chair that cost more than most people's monthly rent, looking out over an empire. Hit that like button right now if this story already has you, because we are just getting to the part where everything breaks open. His real name was Alexander Voss, 31 years old, CEO of a company that owned companies, a face that appeared on magazine covers with headlines like "The Future of Business" and "The Man Who Doesn't Lose," the kind of wealth that doesn't look like wealth because it has moved so far past flashy that it has become quiet, structural, built into everything around it. Alexander had learned something early. The moment people knew who he was, they changed. Conversations that had been natural became calculated. Questions that had seemed genuine started to feel like research. Every woman who smiled at him, he found himself wondering if she was smiling at him or at the number attached to his name. So he built a door, a small quiet door through which he could step out of his own life for a few hours every night. He called the man on the other side of that door Adrian. Adrian had no empire. Adrian had no magazine covers. Adrian had only words, and for a long time that was enough. Emily was supposed to be just another conversation, but then something happened that Alexander had not planned for. He started looking forward to her messages in a way that was different from the others. He caught himself checking his phone during board meetings, smiling at a screen in a room full of people who would have found it inexplicable if they knew why. For the first time in years, inside the fortress he had built around himself, something real was growing. But secrets have weight. The longer you carry them, the heavier they get. And 3 months in, Emily asked the question he had known was coming. "Why don't we ever meet?" Alexander stared at the screen for a long time. Then he typed, "What if meeting me changes everything?" Emily's reply came quickly. "Maybe it will, but maybe that's exactly what I want." He looked out at the city below him and felt something he almost didn't recognize. Fear, not of danger, of truth, of the moment she would see who he actually was, and the warm, uncomplicated thing between them would become something complicated and different and possibly broken. But Emily had already decided. Let's meet. And the world he had kept so carefully separated was about to collapse into itself. She arrived first. Green dress, heart going too fast. She watched the door of the restaurant and told herself to breathe. Then she saw him walking toward her and felt the bottom drop out of everything. She knew that face. She had seen it on a magazine at a dentist's office 6 months ago. She had seen it on a news website during a business story she had scrolled past without reading. Alexander Voss, the billionaire, the untouchable, the man who had been sending her voice notes about his favorite songs at 3 in the morning. He stopped a few steps away. Neither of them spoke. Then he said quietly, "I didn't lie about how I feel." Emily's voice was very steady when she answered, "You lied about everything else." He had no response to that, because she was right. But what Emily still didn't know, what Alexander was about to tell her before the black car screeched to the curb and the two men stepped out, was that the secret of his identity was the small secret, the manageable one. There was another one underneath it, darker, more dangerous, the kind of secret that doesn't stay hidden forever. It grows, and eventually it starts reaching out into the world around you and pulling people in without their consent. Emily had been pulled in the moment she agreed to meet him. She just didn't know it yet. Now she was running, hand in his hand, heels on wet pavement, the city blurring around her as he pulled her toward a waiting car she hadn't seen before, its engine already running, a driver who clearly knew exactly what was happening. Alexander pushed the door open, they got in, and it moved before it was fully closed. Emily's breath was ragged, her hands were shaking. She looked at the man sitting next to her. This stranger she felt she knew completely, this person she had trusted in the dark for 3 months, and she said the only thing left to say, "Tell me everything, right now, all of it." Alexander looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something she had never seen in all their late-night conversations. Not warmth, not humor, not the careful tenderness she had fallen in love with. She saw exhaustion, the deep structural exhaustion of a man who had been carrying something enormous for a very long time. "I will," he said, "but first you need to understand something." He glanced out the rear window at the city receding behind them. "The people behind us are not after my money." Emily waited. "They're after what I know." The car moved through the dark city and Emily sat very still, thinking about a message that had arrived at 2:17 in the morning, about a decision she had made in 30 seconds that had taken 3 months to arrive here. She had wanted to find love. What she had found instead was a war with a love story buried inside it, and she was already too deep to walk away. If this story has you gripped, smash that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications because part 2 is where everything explodes. And drop a comment below. Did you trust Adrian from the beginning, or did something feel off to you? We read every single comment. See you in the next one.